Welcome.
Bonjour.
Vous écoutez le podcast Dirty Feet sur les ondes de No More Radio.
You're listening to the Dirty Feet podcast on the No More Radio Network.
Nous sommes vos animateurs.
Et animatrices.
We are your hosts, Allison Burns,
JD Papillon.
Et Stéphanie Morin-Robert.
Listen in.
Écoutez.
We're gonna move you.
Today on the Dirty Feet podcast, I interview George Stamos, who is creating a new work called Situations for Agora de la danse here in Montreal. The production will be performed September 30th, October 1st, and 2nd at 8 p.m. with a Meet the Choreographer experience after the October 1st show. The work features dancers Jean Bui, Owen Carpman, Danny Desjardins, Oliver Kumstatira, Sébastien Provencier, as well as guest artists Sylvia De Sousa, Emily Roberts, Winnie Superhova, Gabrielle Supernant-Lacasse, Anouk Thériault, and Nate Yaffe. The original soundscape's by Jackie Galland, and it's being remixed live by one of the performers, Owen Chapman. It's also rehearsal directed by Sarah Williams. And the rest of the details will come during our conversation. Enjoy. During the first weekend of October at Agora de la danse, they're going to be presenting the work of George Stamos called Situations. This is a new piece with a pretty big cast, and I'm looking forward to speaking with George a bit about the creation of this new work. Hi, George.
Hi, Allison. Nice to see you.
Thank you for having me. So I want to start with the casting of this work because it was a bit. It created curiosity the way that you've delegated the casting on the website. So I understand that there are 4 dancers and 1 live mixing musician who are the core members, and they're all male.
That's right.
And yes. I think that is important to say based on the intention of the work.
Yeah, that's right. There's 5 performers, the 4 dancers and the musician who I've worked with the longest on the piece. And I created material where we were investigating masculinity and what that could mean, and for a choreographic process and piece. And along the way, I opened up the piece to invite other perspectives on masculinity because I felt like that was needed to get to a place where there were a lot of diverse. Because gender is quite complicated as a topic to attack, and I wanted to do the work of actually not just doing sort of the easiest thing, but actually digging into some of the more challenging aspects of gender equality, homophobia, the way men relate to each other, male aggression, some of that too. So I opened it up to guests to come in and have different meetings with the core guys, like artistic meetings where we developed some material, and then I've decided to continue working with them. So now there's actually a cast of 11 people that will perform, which is mostly men. There are 4 women, 5 women. There's actually 5 women and 5 men. 6 men if we count the DJ, but the dancers so there's 11 in total, and situations, yeah.
So you've brought in these 6 extra artists, these guest artists who are actually on stage or in the show every night of the week.
Exactly, yeah. Every night there's 11 people performing.
Yeah. So let's talk about this. Let's delve into this very complex, it seems like very layered subject matter that you're dealing with right now.
Yeah.
I love that in your description you use the words metrosexual, but also lumbersexual, and in this exploration of kind of modern masculinity.
Yeah, well, I feel like the metrosexual and the lumbersexual kind of stereotypes or propositions highlight how gender is a construct in a way, and part of that is really useful for me as an artist, because I also believe that gender is a construct, and that's how I approach it as a choreographic process. So we're in many ways looking at how is gender performed, which is also why it makes it more interesting to have some of the women there who are performing masculinity, so that we can start to talk about masculinity as a concept or a phenomena outside of the gender you're born into. So that's yeah.
So are these like sub-genres of gender then? Is that kind of the idea of the different things that you're highlighting through this mixed cast?
I'm highlighting diversity for sure through the mixed cast. That's for sure. And I'm coming at it from a viewpoint of gender being performed in different ways, masculinity being performed in different ways, and different viewpoints on masculinity. So I do want to challenge people's sort of... I want to challenge kind of really simplistic ideas about masculine and feminine, because like I think it would be easy in a way to make a piece fetishizing the male body, and we've certainly seen lots of fetishizing of the female body, and I think we've started to see more fetishizing of the male body, which had certain value, I think, and does have value to do that as a sort of role reversal. But I think to go beyond fetishizing each other, it could be also interesting in a performance, so that it doesn't become just about, oh, the male body on stage. I love to see men dancing, you know? It's like, well, let's let those men be more than just fetishized sort of objects to ogle at. Like, sure, if you... I mean, there is fetishizing of the body, absolutely, in the piece. And there's some kind of sexually loaded content in a way, I think. But we're going into more of the psychology of gender also.
So how do you start to create a process in which that's going to end up on stage? Is that something that you have to negotiate with the personalities of the people that you're working with? How do you find the nuance?
Well, I've done a lot of research over the years. Gender's always been an aspect that I've considered in my processes. And actually this work is coming out of, I would say about, maybe 5 years ago. I was becoming increasingly annoyed at how putting a male body and a female body together on stage had this natural heteronormative default of this certain kind of duet or romantic story that would be interpreted, even if it wasn't your intention as a choreographer. Working with the male and female body together was a real challenge, is a real challenge still, I think, in terms of certain pitfalls that emerge when you have like say a duet with a man and a woman. There's this default viewpoint that clicks in. The sort of Romeo and Juliet story comes into play just as a cultural norm, you know. And I wanted to challenge that, and I wanted to, that for me, that was becoming a distraction. And also because I've worked with a lot of amazing women over the years, and I've always been aware of the history of the objectification of the female body on stage, and thought that I had to deal with that reality in terms of like being sensitive to what are we doing, what are the images that we're putting out there. Also these other defaults of, the beautiful female dancer, and how we could subvert that, and that led to some very interesting collaborations. Like Sarah Williams commissioned me to do this piece, Croque Monsieur. There was a solo for her that investigated gender as well, where we challenged that. Sarah Williams is also involved in this project as rehearsal director, and she's amazing. So I did all of that work, and then I felt like I wanted to just focus on working with I wanted to get out of that distraction. So then I began projects where I was working with only women or only men. I didn't want to work with men and women together. I wanted to work with only women or only men because I just didn't want to deal with that distraction. And that was a very interesting period of figuring out what are some tendencies or some issues that are commonalities amongst groups of men and groups of women. I mean, of course, there's always diversity and fluctuation, but I found there were some tendencies and approaches to work that were very nuanced that I kind of mined through with some of these performers. Two of the women who were in the piece, Nicterio and Gabrielle Supernolacas, are dancers that I also made a duet with, where we looked at feminism and what feminism meant for them and what that meant for a male choreographer to be directing two women in a piece about feminism. So that was also complicated and involved a lot of dialogue and a lot of dialogue. And that material has infiltrated this piece too. So that's an aspect of it. So you have the male masculinity, the sort of norms that are there, and then those being subverted, and then also a feminist viewpoint on masculinity.
And that work was Nuna Nuna?
Nun nu no.
Nun Nu No?
Yeah, nun nu no. Nun like hallelujah, noon like vagina in French, no like no.
And it was presented at the Bouche du Sea Cabaret. Was it presented anywhere else?
It was presented at the Théâtre Outremont as part of the Encuentro. And it still exists as a duet that is separate from this, but there's, I shouldn't give everything away, actually. There's a few surprises that come in. But yeah, it's definitely a mixed cast, but it is a variety of everywhere. Masculinity is performed in many different ways.
I'm curious about the idea of being a male choreographer for this work, not necessarily for the feminism angle, but just for the working with female bodies. And I'm wondering if Sarah Williams has helped you in that sense, or if you're just working with professionals that translation doesn't necessarily need to happen. Working
with the women, you mean?
Yeah, just in terms of like opening up what it is to match what the men are doing if you're studying this kind of masculinity.
Well, interestingly, it's not as simple as that, because there's also like something. I think we have a lot to learn from each other all the time, and I think the women are learning things from the men, and the men are learning things from the women too about masculinity. And I think often women are teaching men what masculinity is, and I think it's a binary system that works with a certain kind of reflectiveness to the other. So it is about like femininity is performed for the male gaze, and masculinity is often performed for the female gaze. So having women there actually helps direct the masculinity in a certain way, and it's interesting how that plays out in different ways.
Just to jaunt back to the buzzwords for a moment, because you did mention that the subject of masculinity and putting men on stage has been done before with contemporary dance.
Yeah,
I feel like maybe ahead of culture. And then at this point in time, there seems to be kind of a focus or an obsession with these categories of metrosexual, lumbersexual, these kind of like of categorizing different ways of displaying yourself.
Contemporary culture, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm wondering if that makes this more of a. Do you think this is like an ideal moment for this work? Was that part of your drive?
Yeah, just to say also about the binary, that I'm definitely trying to break the binary way of thinking, and open things up. So there's a real queer approach going on in this take on masculinity. Yeah, and to answer your question,
Kind of like how culture is obsessed with these ideas now.
yeah, I actually don't think that contemporary dance is always so in tune with contemporary culture. I think that maybe we're often behind it in some ways. Like I think the boy bands and the sort of the male group thing has been around a long time. Okay. And there's been like a sort of resurgence in the contemporary dance kind of bubble of interest in this in the last few seasons, I see. And I've done work that's been part of that too, but I am trying to align with something that is contemporary. I feel like as a contemporary artist, I want to do that. It's interesting to me. And I think that these terms, I think there's a playfulness with male sexuality and gender that is also a product of the privilege and the freedom that especially white men have that they can be relaxed enough to sort of be playful like that without being shamed for being, overly sexual or something like a woman might be. So that playfulness I'm really kind of hijacking, and it's like, okay, well, if we can be playful, and then let's open it up to new ideas too. And I think also we're at a time when maybe the idea of diversity is, well, it's funny because there's the illusion of progress too with certain things where we have a lot of tokenisms with things, and often like sort of a Hollywood like presentation of like putting someone on a totem as a symbol of Caitlyn Jenner, Ellen DeGeneres, other people being like, oh, well, see, like they're out there on TV, so it's okay now, kind of thing. And these people are really rich, and they're really, they're presenting a very kind of like specific class viewpoint or position about what's possible in life. But meanwhile, there's a lot of people that are really struggling with acceptance in terms of diversity in their life. And with their family and their communities. I don't necessarily think that the contemporary dance community is any different than that in a lot of ways. I think it's something, there's a strange phenomena that happens where you see a lot of heteronormative duets performed by straight women and gay men. And I think I understand it in terms of, if I was a straight woman and I was going to do a duet with a guy touching me all over the place, I'd probably prefer if it was a gay guy, because it might be it might be kind of like too intense, if there was that question of like, oh, are they really into me, or if it became too real like that. But I think it'd be nice if we could just get a little bit more in tune with what's really happening in the room, in terms of how we're performing gender, how we're seeing each other, the kind of roles that we're playing, and how we don't need to play those roles, how they reflect who we are or they don't,
So is this work a little bit for the contemporary dance community? I feel when the question comes up of who are you making it for, what do you hope your audience is going to be, it's fairly predictable in Montreal, like who your audience is going to be, and it will probably be largely that community.
Yeah, well, I hope it'll be lots of different people. I hope there'll be more gay people. I hope there'll be more different kinds of people, like a diversity of audience. I'm certainly not making the piece just for the contemporary dance audience. I'm making it for the world. This sounds really pretentious. No, but I'm making the piece with the idea of inviting other people into it. I would really love it if people who felt like, I think this is a piece where we can all the audience can maybe feel hopefully a little bit more spoken to about with this topic of gender and gender roles, because the idea of the classic heroic male and the classic beautiful female, these ideals about gender that are often represented on stage, there's really not a lot of people, even though this is supposed to be the norm, quote unquote, there's really not a lot of people that actually feel like that, that speaks to who they are, you know? So I think the real norm is diversity. And so though hopefully people won't feel alienated, they'll feel like it's representative of their experience somehow in that wash of masculinity.
To get to logistics a little bit, can we talk about the live mixed music, that it's going to be Owen Chapman, it's going to be working tracks by Jackie Galland?
Yeah, that's right. Jackie Galland, who I've worked with several times in previous productions. I've worked with Owen a lot too, but Jackie made some tracks that Owen mixes live, and Owen also mixes. Also records sound live, and also Emily Roberts is doing some sound recordings as well, some live mixing of sound, and there's body percussion used in it. I've been working a lot with rhythmic elements more and more. I worked with Nyata Nyata, Sarc d'Expression, with Zab Mambangu, the choreographer, as a dancer. I worked a lot as a dancer as well. And I worked with that company for 3.5 years, and I'll work with them again. And undergone an intense training in some of the Central African dance techniques and approaches to polyrhythm, and that's been integrated into my viewpoint as an artist. And so I like to, it's another sort of something I have in my toolbox, and that's in there. That's in the piece.
And I expect we can expect some surprises in terms of costuming and prop work, perhaps.
There's some enhanced bodies. Some bodies have been enhanced. Again, with this idea of taking the cliche or these ideas. I mean, like, that's why I reference lumbersexual and metrosexual, because I just find they're so ridiculous. In a way, these ideas, especially the lumbersexual one, if you think about it, and how everything's so flipped, where it's like it used to be you could really tell who was gay by, and I mean, I am a homosexual, and I used to really enjoy being able to tell who was gay. And then with the metrosexual thing, it became really like, you can tell because the straight guys start wanting to, take care of their fashion and stuff. And then the gay guys started wanting to butch it up, not look too fashionable. But now that has even become, because so much of fashion comes from gay culture, that's now been packaged, that butching it up, into this sort of lumbersexual thing too. I mean, there are other elements as well, but that have contributed to the lumbersexual look. But I think that's really kind of ridiculous, that flipping of things.
I was just thinking that gay culture has also brought us a lot in the way of dance and dance styles, thinking about like whacking and voguing and different elements there.
Yes, absolutely. Whacking and voguing are really amazing techniques that I have a lot of respect for. And I studied way back in the 90s. I studied with Willie Ninja and Archie Burnett. And I did a lot of go-go dancing when I was younger, and like for 10 years. And I have a lot of respect for those forms. I don't practice those forms regularly. I mean, it's incredibly rigorous dancing, whacking and voguing, and it's beautiful. I think there's maybe something that's, lingered and cutting into my aesthetic that I like to think is coming from there too, from my experience, my touching on that as I've woven all these influences, into an aesthetic that I have. But certainly in terms of walking, there's a lot of walking in the piece. There's a lot of like looking at how walking and marching can be gendered. Yeah. So that leads itself to some of the voguing walking.
Can you give us any more descriptive notes about the movement quality in the work?
Well, I would say that there's a real flipping from very militant kind of empowered bodies, like, yeah, like militant, like marching type bodies, and really sort of pumped up. I've been studying some marching. One of the guest artists is also a police officer, and she's been showing us also some of the police march training, and also coming from the Nyata Nyata work that I did, and then the technique. There's a lot of that. Some of those dances are war dances. Coming from Central Africa, that we're not doing them, but I have that. I've touched on that, so that's found its way in, that energy. So there's that going on, and then there's also a kind of really casual, more complacent, kind of playful posing, or like kittens playing with a ball of yarn, kind of kind of stuff. But there's a lot of really kind of masculine stuff.
And there's quite a little range too in your promotional video, which I encourage people to watch to get an idea of what's going on. And that, I believe, features just the core dancers. Yeah,
that's right. Well, there's 2 videos now that are going out. There's one with Anouk and Gab doing material from the piece, and then there's also one with the guys that shows them. Yeah.
Cool. Any last words about Situations?
Well, I can tell you this. It's going to be a show with a lot of energy. And the bottom sort of line, if there is one, that I'm coming to with this, looking for commonalities amongst all this diversity, is that everybody has the right to feel empowered in their body, and everyone. And so the idea is to convey that to the audience and to transmit that. So hopefully it's the kind of show that you're going to leave feeling kind of pumped up and feel like good about yourself. That's what the intention is.
And then go fight a dance party.
Yeah, and then go do whatever it is you want to do. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I've been speaking with George Stamos about Situations, which is opening at Agora the first weekend of October.
Yeah, thank you.
The Dirty Feet podcast is produced and hosted by
Produit et animé par
Allison Burns,
JD Papillon,
et Stéphanie Morin-Robert.
We have Mainline Theatre, Montreal Improv Theatre, and Paul Aflalo to thank.
Merci pour le soutien.
Vous pouvez visiter notre site web, écouter les derniers épisodes, lire notre blog, nous aimer sur Facebook et nous suivre sur Twitter.
You can visit our website, listen to past episodes, read our blog, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter.
Show us some love and help us spread the word.
Montrez-nous un peu d'amour et aidez-nous à passer le mot.